I have moved over 20 times in the past 10 years. Why? I really couldn't tell you. I don't know why I have this sudden impulse sometimes to get up, pack everything up and go and move to another apartment. That's something that you can ask my therapist. But that's besides the point. That's not what this video is about. I'm here to actually tell you from my years of moving and my 10 years of professional experience as a leasing agent, what you should ask when you're about to rent an apartment. Here are 30 questions that you must ask before you rent an apartment. So number one, you should always ask to see the exact apartment that you're going to rent. Now, this varies from case to case, but if you're going to be renting from a big corporate company, a lot of times they'll show you a model unit and they'll say, okay, this isn't the exact unit that you're going to be moving into, but we'll show you the model. And oh, it's very similar. A lot of times that can be okay, but you should always just check to see if the actual unit is available to see. At the very minimum, you want to see if there's pictures of the unit from maybe a previous tenant or when it was actually vacant. You always want to see the actual apartment because the model unit a lot of times misses some key things. When you get into your actual apartment, it may be way smaller. The light might be hitting from a different area, making the apartment way darker than the model unit. So I always just recommend checking out the model unit if it's available. If not, just do your best to check out pictures online and compare notes with the floor plan and the actual model. Okay. Number two, look up reviews for the apartment building that you're about to move into. A lot of you guys saw that I just moved into the apartment that I'm in now, and I did an apartment hunting video where I looked at a handful of apartments. I made sure to look at all the reviews before even going on tours. It's really important to see what other tenants' experiences have been over the past years, and it'll really bring up some good questions that you can ask when you're actually on the tour if you see something that's a red flag in the reviews. Number three is actually something that you'll ask when you're on the physical tour, and that is, what are my lease options? So could I do a 6-month lease? If I do a 6-month lease, is that going to cost more? Or you could ask, what if I were to do a 2-year lease and pay a little less? A lot of different property management companies have different lease options. And so before you actually sign or put down an application, you want to make sure that you're aware of what all of your options are. Number four seems like an obvious one, but you can't imagine how many tours I've given where people have forgot to ask these basic questions. And number four is, what are the leasing fees? So that could range depending on what state you're in or what kind of property it is. So in New York, they have tons of fees. You have a broker's fee, application fee, screening fee. There's fees for days in New York City. In LA, it's not as rigorous as an application process. I usually only had to ask people for an application fee, which included a screening fee. And we also asked for a deposit. Some places require you to pay other fees, so you just want to make sure that you're aware of all the actual fees for signing with them. Number five is, what is the typical turnaround for maintenance requests? So it's a good question to ask because it helps you to hold your property management company accountable later on. So if you just say, hey, like about typically if I had a plumbing issue or you know, maybe my light is out or my garbage disposal is not working, what's the typical like turnaround for maintenance? So you're basically saying like about how long does it take maintenance to address an issue if one comes up? And that's a really good question, and it's something that you should definitely ask if you're renting from a private owner, like if you're renting somebody's home, because a lot of the times they will be the one doing the hands-on stuff. And if they live an hour away, you know, first of all, not very responsible as the owner, but two, that means it's going to take some time for them to get to your request. Some buildings only have one property manager or one maintenance person, sorry. So that might also take a little longer. Maybe they have a whole entire team, you know, so just that question helps you gauge what your experience is going to be like when you're actually living in the apartment. Number six is, what are the security measures in the building or in the area? So Before I moved into the apartment complex that I'm in now, I lived in a house, which was a duplex, and there really wasn't any kind of security. I had to request my landlord to put in certain security measures, like a light sensor in the back area when I'm walking out late at night into my door, just to have a light come on. I know you wouldn't really think about that as security, but it is. In my building now, we have security all evening into the morning, and then there's always somebody in the building that works for the company. So the security is really, really tight. You also need a swab to get into the building. You can't just walk in. So it's really, really tight security, which I love because I do live in a downtown area where there's lots of people coming and going, a large homeless population. So it's really nice to have that extra security. So always ask, what are the security measures here in the building? Can anybody just come in and out? Do you have security cameras? Do you have actual security? If there's an emergency, like, is there an emergency button? Like, different things like that. Even like carbon dioxide detectors in the apartment, have they been up to date? Do they have the correct batteries in them? So little things like that are all encompassed in security. So always ask that. So next is what is required to move in. Number 7, what is required to move in? Similar to the previous question about the fees, it's different everywhere, right? And even in one city, it's different from landlord to landlord. So some people require you to make 2 to 3 times the rent. Some people, they want like emergency contact information. Some people want references. So you have to get like several references to prove that you're like sane. You have to get your W-2s for some places. I actually had to do that recently, and I've never had to do that. So always ask what's required to move in, so you're not surprised later on, and so you don't miss out on the apartment because you didn't know that there was a document that you needed, and somebody else gets theirs in faster than you. So number 8 is kind of awkward. It's not actually a question, but it's something that you do when you're physically in the apartment on the tour. You want to look around. Check the blinds, make sure they're not snagging. You want to go ahead and check the cabinets, open and close them, see if they're like old, you know, creaky. You want to check the water pressure, turn on the faucets, make sure the water pressure is good. When I was in LA, this is so gross, but I toured an apartment, and this is like 10 years ago. I toured an apartment. It was like my first actual apartment by myself. It was in Koreatown. If you're in Los Angeles and you're watching this, do not live in Koreatown. I feel like it has gotten a little bit better than it used to be, but it's still terrible. Anyway, I was looking at a studio apartment in Koreatown, and I opened up a drawer. I opened up all the cabinet drawers. I did everything I was supposed to do, I think. Did I open up a drawer? I don't actually think I opened up the drawer. When I moved in, I opened up the kitchen cabinet, and there were roaches. And y'all, when I say I freaked out, if I had taken a little bit more time during the tour and really inspected, I might have been able to see that that was an infested apartment. So those are things that you really want to take your time. And it was terrible trying to get that company to let me out of my lease. Like, they wouldn't let me. I had to fight with them. And I found myself having to do that a lot over the years. So that's why I wanted to make this video. Even though this is like a home decor channel, it still is in that home apartment family of the topic. So I wanted to like make this video, especially because I know a lot of you are moving around and not everybody stays in one place at one time, especially when you're renting apartments. So this is a topic that just stays relevant. So moving on. Number 9, you want to drive around the area at night. You want to see what it's like at night, because in the daytime, everything can just seem like, you know, wonderland, like you were on cloud 9, and then at nighttime, you might be hearing gunshots, or you might see that there's absolutely no parking in the area. So those are things that you want to check on. Always drive around the area at night, and that just gives you a better feel, a more honest feel of what it's going to be like living there. Number 10, you want to ask if you can add a roommate on later. So this is relevant for if you're in a 2-bedroom or a studio 1-bedroom. Let's say you start dating someone and you want to move them in can you? You know, if you find out that you maybe have lost your job and you want to add on a roommate to the lease, are you able to do that? So those are nice flexible options that are nice to have, and you should always ask to see if that would be an option later down the road if you needed it to be. Number 11 is what amenities are on site. So that seems like a basic one, and I know most of you do ask that question. So my building, it doesn't have a pool or anything like that, but it is located downtown, so I'm close to nearby shops. I have like a rec room here, and so those are things that you should ask, like, hey, what amenities are in the building? Or if there's none in the building, like what kind of amenities are nearby for me to access? Number 12 is how much do utilities usually cost on average? So this is a great question because your rent can be one price, but your utilities really bump up your rent price. So even though your rent might be $1,200, if your utilities are $100 to $200 a month, there you go. You just had a $1,400 rent that you weren't expecting. So you definitely want to make sure you get that amount so that you can add it into your budget. So an add-on to this question, I guess this is a bonus, is how are utilities calculated? So for heat, for example, how does consumers calculate that for my particular unit? I once worked as a property manager for a company where it was a big house split into a bunch of different apartments. And the way utility was calculated there is they just took one lump sum bill from the utility company every month, and they evenly divided it amongst all the residents who lived in the house, and that was their utility bill for the month. Like the last place that I lived, I was responsible for heat, and the guy upstairs in his apartment, he was responsible for water. Where I'm living now, every apartment has their own meter. So those are just things that you wanna check up on and know before you sign a lease. Number 13 is, are there plans to renovate the building? So this question helps you gauge if there's gonna be construction in the area. So you don't wanna live with a bunch of construction. It's very uncomfortable, super noisy. It factors in so many things, like sometimes things get shut off, sometimes parking is taken up. So you kind of want to know, hey, is there going to be any updates to the building recently? Any experienced leasing agent knows what that question actually means is, hey, are you guys going to be doing construction? Is it going to be loud and inconvenient? But they're happy to answer. That's their job, so they will let you know. But you should ask that question if that is something that would bother you. It's good to know. You want to make sure to ask about guest parking. So if there's no actual guest parking in the building that you're seeing, you should ask the leasing agent, hey, so where would my guests park? Do you have any recommendations for areas nearby or even parking decks nearby where I could send my guests? This is a very fair question to ask, and it really helps you later on, just the headache of guests looking for parking, because then nobody's gonna wanna come over your house. So make sure that you know the spots where your guests can park if you already don't have guest parking in the building. You should also ask the leasing agent about the policies on subletting. Let's say you wanna just get up and go to Bali for 2 months and live your life as a nomad. Can you get somebody to take over your lease, or will you have to pay for your lease while you're gone? Also, sometimes Airbnb contracts can be written up as subletting contracts. If I decide to move on and buy a house, but I don't want to give up my unit, would I be able to Airbnb it? Now, be careful with this question because sometimes it can be a huge turn off and a red flag to a leasing agent or a landlord. So don't ask about Airbnb unless you're certain that that's something that you want to invest in. And that's a whole different video about how to approach a landlord about Airbnb. Go ahead and drop a comment below if you were interested in learning about that topic. But for now, let's just stick with subletting. So just check with them and see if subletting is allowed for emergency purposes. Okay, that was number 15. We are halfway done, but we have 15 more, okay? So you wanna stick around, honey, because you need to know these 15. Number 16, what do you guys do with packages? How are packages delivered? Where do they go? It's different for every place that you go to. For me, it gets delivered to a mailroom that has a specific code that you need to enter, but we have to let every delivery person know that code. So there are mailing instructions that we do need to know as tenants so that we can get our packages. You don't want your packages left outside So these are kind of questions that you need to know, like where are my packages gonna go? And if I'm in a place where they're not going to a specific spot, what's the best way to get them delivered? Do I just go pick them up at Amazon or at a UPS? Is it that sketchy where I live where I can't get packages? Do I even want to live here if you don't have a specific place for packages to go? So always ask that question because it can be a big deal, especially in today's age where like 80% of shopping is done online. Number 17 is one of those that people forget about, but how do I pay my rent every month? That's something you should ask. Do I have to pay it online? Do I have to get a physical check like it's the 1700s? Like, some people still do that. So you want to know, how am I going to pay my rent every month? Is it going to be just a quick click that I can do right on my phone? Or is it going to be a more tedious process? If so, I might look somewhere else. So just know ahead of time how that's done. Number 18 is another slightly uncomfortable one to ask, but it is necessary to ask. And that's, have you ever had a pest problem in this unit? You could also say, how often do you guys treat the building for pests? Especially when you're in a big city, you find that the problem of having pests is increased. And they're not just gonna volunteer that information, unfortunately. As a leasing agent, it's their job to sell you the unit and rent you the unit. So they're not gonna just start off with all the negative things. So you have to ask these negative and slightly harder questions to get those answers. So if there was a mice problem, roaches, bed bugs, those kinds of things, I literally just cringe at the thought of saying all these things. But you have to make sure to ask. And don't be so desperate to get an apartment that you forget to ask the important questions. You know me, I love to design, so I'm asking, what changes can I make? Can I paint the unit? If I paint, do I have to paint it back? Those are questions that you want to ask. Like, what can I hang? Do I have to use like certain little picture nails? Can I hang stuff on the wall? Can I paint? You know, little changes like that. You want to get permission from your landlord and just ask the agent ahead of time what's allowed and what's not allowed. I'm probably still gonna do it anyway. So number 20, we only have 10 more to go. You guys are still watching, which I really appreciate. It's not too late to subscribe and hit that like button and comment below. You have no idea how much subscribing helps me. It really helps the algorithm to say, hey, people are liking this, and push it out to other people so that they can see, and then I can help other people. So please subscribe if you're watching and you're enjoying this content. I would really appreciate it. Anyway, let's keep the ball rolling. Number 20, do I need renter's insurance? It'll be different with each property you go to. Regardless if they require you to get renter's insurance or not, I do highly recommend it for different things like floods, break-ins, just things just get damaged in the everyday, and sometimes it's unpreventable, and it really helps to have renter's insurance to cover those things. So number 21 is, hey, do you have any signing specials? You want to make sure to ask about signing specials because they don't offer it to every person who sees the unit. For example, when I worked as a leasing agent, I hate to admit that I didn't offer specials to everyone because sometimes it could save the company a lot of money to not offer a special. Specials sometimes were offered to people who really were like on the fence, you know, and like, hey, well, by the way, we can get a month off, or we can give you 50% off your first month, or blah, blah, blah. Or sometimes it's, you want to refer a friend. If you refer a friend, we'll give you a discount or we'll give you a credit. So there's all kinds of specials that property management companies offer to get people to sign. So if you are interested in the unit, you want to make sure to ask that question because maybe it could save you some money. You never know. Number 22 is, what are some nearby transportation services? So for example, how far away from the highway? Is the highway south, north? Are there any bus stops nearby? Where can I take the train? Is there a walking distance train? Things like that, especially if you're in a city. Where's the nearest subway? So always knowing where your public transportation is, mostly the ones that you'll be using. So if you're gonna be driving to work every day on the highway, hey, how far is the highway from here? Little things like that. Or maybe you have guests coming from out of town. About how long does it take to get to the airport from here, or just curious. I have a lot of visitors. I live away from my family. So those are things that you should ask. Number 23 is, do you have quiet hours? That's good to know. Maybe you're a music producer and you have your music pretty loud during the day, but you're a night owl, you know, like, or maybe you're really social, or maybe you practice violin. You know, there's a billion different reasons why you could need to make some sort of noise in your unit. And it's always good to know, like, what kind of building am I in? Am I in a building where, you know, a little noise like around 7, 8 o'clock is okay? Or will I have notes on my door every 5 seconds? Or will I get notices from the property manager saying to quiet down? So just kind of feeling out the building and what the culture is there. And by asking what are the quiet hours, that can kind of open up that kind of conversation. And I guess that was a feed on to my next number, which is number 24, which is just observe the building. Find out what kind of culture is there. As a leasing agent, you're not allowed to like talk about demographics and things like that in the building. That's against the law, but you can kind of get a sense, like, are there a lot of students here? Like, I'm a student. Are there a lot of students here? Or if you're a lot older, you know, are there, you know, a lot of seniors in the building? Will I be the only senior in the building? Or are there families here? I have 2 kids. You know, is this a family-friendly building? Or will everyone see my kids as a nuisance? Like, so things like that are good to ask so you can get a vibe of the culture. They can't, again, directly tell you different demographics, but they can give you an overall vibe of the building. Number 25 is to ask, what is the internet connection like there? What services do they use? So I do a lot of video editing. I have a video editing job on top of my YouTube job. So I spend hours and hours editing. Sometimes I'm editing for like 48 hours, like back to back to back. And I need a strong connection because I'm constantly downloading files and uploading files and downloading files and uploading files. So a building that has AT&T fiber, which is like one of the fastest internet connections, is so important to me. And it actually was one of the deciding factors on why I chose the building that I'm in today. So just check, what is the internet connection? Maybe you Zoom and FaceTime your family a lot. Maybe they're away and you need that strong connection to talk to them. Maybe you are a gamer, or a lot of us are working from home now, so that connection is really important. But yeah, you want to make sure that you check on the internet. Oh, also, one of the other places that I looked at, the Wi-Fi just like sucked. It was terrible. And I'm like, I can't live here. I can't text my friends. So you want to also check the Wi-Fi, you know, for your phone to see, can I even make a call in this building, or will I have to like go outside? I live in Michigan, okay? I'm not going outside to call anybody. So you want to make sure that you check on those before you go. Number 26 almost never gets asked, if you can believe me. In my 10 years as a leasing agent, I don't even think once, maybe once or twice I've been asked this, but it's how much does the rent go up each year? You want to ask what their rent increase percentage is for each year, because if you don't want to move in a year, you want to make sure you're okay with the rent increase for next year. If you're already at the top of your budget this year, think about that. Next year, are you going to be able to afford where you live? So you need to ask, hey, like, I know rent typically increases every year. Like on average, like what's your percentage? I did talk to my landlord when I moved here about that. And it's very, very low here. But I've lived places that really jack it up every year. And I've moved because of it. So you want to make sure you ask that. If you're in a rent stabilized building, then you're golden, you're good. The rent is like not going to go up at all. So you want to make sure to ask that question, because if not, you could be packing up all your stuff and moving the next year, and that just is not fun. So number 27 is, how much time do I have to live in my apartment before I'm asked to renew? And I would couple that with, how much notice do I have to give before leaving the apartment? So I worked for a student housing company years ago where the students, maybe like 3 months into their lease, would have to say, hey, we're gonna lease this again for next year. For a lot of people, that's really, really short notice. It's not enough time to live in a house to say, hey, like, I like this, let's live here again. And then with students, they don't know that they're going to be friends with their roommates next year. So how do they know that they want to renew? And so if they hadn't renewed in that 3-month period, we would start then taking their apartment and leasing it for the following year. So you want to know, like, hey, like, how much time do I have to before I say, hey, I want to renew? So for the building I'm in now, it's a year lease. And then at the end of the year, I can either renew for the next year or go month to month after that. That's actually pretty standard for most apartments, but you definitely want to check on that before you lease. So while you're at your apartment tour, go ahead and ask the leasing agent that question. Only 3 more questions left. Number 28, you want to ask your leasing agent during your apartment tour, what is this apartment facing? Is this south facing? Is it north facing, west, or east facing? The best is south facing because you get that sunrise and sunset. This is a south facing apartment. I'm very happy to say. But you want to know what that's like because it'll affect the amount of light that's going to come into your apartment each day. I don't know really what the others would be like. I just know that south facing is the best because you have the overall best amount of sunlight. If you are a morning person, you might want an east facing apartment, or if you are a night owl, you might want a west facing. So yeah, just things to think about. Things to think about. Number 29 is, do you allow pets? Pretty self-explanatory. Do you allow pets? If so, what is the pet rent? And or do you have restrictions on the kind of dogs that I can have? So number 30 is a question that you actually have to ask yourself, and that is, can I see myself living here? When you're on an apartment tour, you really want to continuously ask yourself that question. Take your time, walk through the space, really get a sense of, is this home? Is this my home? Is this somewhere I can be long term? Is this somewhere I can feel comfortable? Is this somewhere I can feel like me? And you guys, that's it. Those are my top questions that you should ask when touring an apartment. If you are currently looking for an apartment, I wish you all the best of luck. And let me know if you ask any of these questions and if this has been helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching the channel. As always, I love you all so much. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you next weekend. I have in 2 weeks a room makeover coming, and I'm so excited to show you guys. So make sure you turn on those notifications so you don't miss it. I love you so much, and I'll see you next weekend. Bye.
Phone started jumping, what a day. Swear to God I need it, now I can't afford to wait. I just had a fan hit me up from Kuwait. Told him this would happen and we not a minute late.